Hello, everybody. My name is Don Shelby. It's good to see you again. You might remember me from another place at another time. Things have changed for all of us. I got more white hair, longer, as you can see. Some things don't change, though. Alan Miller doesn't change. He keeps telling us that we need all to have access to democracy. So this is a special. I've been asked, and I am honored to be a part of the 25th anniversary of Access to Democracy. And in this program, we're going to be spending some time with some old friends, some new friends, and we're going to talk about democracy as it has changed over those 25 years. How our guests, spoke about democracy during their first visits. Is it different today? Does true democracy actually exist? So sit back and relax, because it is my personal opinion, as a person who was in commercial broadcasting and journalism for all of these years, that right here on these stations and in your communities with access to democracy are the best informed people in our electorate. Because you have the opportunity to hear longer conversations, deeper conversations than the time limits of commercial television can possibly give. So I owe a great debt of gratitude to Alan Miller and Access to Democracy. I hope you, in your hearts, recognize how lucky you have been to have this incredible guy sitting here every week, introducing you to the important things that we all should know. Enjoy. Welcome back. I'm Don Shelby. I've always wanted to say this: the hardest working man in show business. This is a wonderful opportunity to sit with Alan Miller, who has for 25 years shepherded this program, who has introduced you to so many important people, so many great ideas, how the state functions, how we as citizens work in a community. And you have been the beneficiary of that. And so, Mr. Alan Miller, congratulations on 25 years.
Well, I thank you, Don. And it's really a pleasure. It's first an honor for us to have you, with your national presence, be willing not only to have hosted our 20th anniversary, but to come in again. And you've been a guest, and you've been a guest host in addition to that. Here 25 years. It's hard to believe that 25 years have passed since I had that first interview with Tim Pawlenty, who was then a legislator, before he was a governor, before he was a national presence.
Well, I'm looking at my calendar, and I have an opening for the 50th anniversary. I've already booked out that I'll be back here with you for our 50th celebration.
From your mouth to whomever.
Exactly right.
Actually, I am phasing down from this. I am becoming emeritus, pretty much, on this show. I will do an occasional. Of course, I'll always be available for conferences and all. I'll do an occasional interview. But we have some good people that are taking over. Steve, who you've met, Sharon, who's been a constant, and Bill Raker, I think, who is going to step in, and it'll be in good hands, and it'll continue. And
what will continue? What will continue?
The availability of the people in what is now 36 cities, because we have come from that single interview in Burnsville, Eagan Community Television, to 36 cities in this network that can get 30-minute interviews of people through all walks of life. And we really have had people from all walks of life. and where it's not sound bites, where you can really get some in-depth information. And if it wasn't for the volunteers that we have had over the years, and I really have to give a shout out to our webmaster, Avi Mashar, who...
Avi's always there.
Avi is always there, and he has kept us on. And the volunteers, the people from Egan TV at the moment, Haley, Josh, and Kevin have been wonderful about setting this up. And we've had wonderful cooperation. I mean, we went through the COVID epidemic. We missed two shows.
Virtually, yeah.
We missed 2 shows, and we were back on the air doing Zooms for the whole COVID epidemic.
Yes.
And I can't even turn a light switch on effectively. So you know it wasn't me.
Well, this democracy thing must be somewhat important to you doing all that work.
I think it's probably so important to all of us, particularly now at this time, to keep this experiment called democracy alive. And of course, access to democracy gives the impression that it's a political show. It's not a political show. We have had a ton of politicians. Some of my favorite politicians have been people who are less progressive than I, that we have jousted with. Representative John Klein, who was a member of Congress, he and I had some great interviews.
Yes.
Pat Anderson, who was the mayor and who is now running as a Republican candidate here.
Yeah.
I love her. And we've had, again, some great interviews. Angie Craig is on all the time. And this is so important for people to get a feel of their elected officials and what they're all about.
I ought to tell you that I've taken a page out of Alan's book. One of the complaints about guests who have been on this program is that the guy never tells us ahead of time what kind of questions he's going to ask. And so when we sat down here for this interview, Alan asked me, "What are you going to ask me?" I said, "Not on your life." Yeah, I'm going to tell you.
And it's true, that's what you said.
So I'm going to ask you this question. In these 25 years of doing all this program, how have you seen democracy change?
Well, not necessarily always for the better. Unfortunately, in terms of our national politics, I think we went through 4 years that were very threatening to democracy. I think we're on the cusp now of seeing us get back to what is democracy? Democracy is freedom. Freedom for us to make choices. Freedom for us to go cast our ballot. Freedom to live our own lives. And in the words of a governor who shall remain nameless, if somebody doesn't like what we're doing, we say to them, mind your own damn business. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of what democracy is about to me. And what we tried to do in this program is, and again, it started out with just one interview, which I did very poorly in, and was determined to do better. It just growed and it growed and it growed. And we've had people from all walks of life. You know, I made some notes here of who we've had. We've had governors and elected officials. We've had judges from all courts, and at one point had 5 out of the 7 Supreme Court justices here. Great help from Thomson Reuters when we were over there. We've had doctors of all persuasions, interesting medical information, writers, a ton of writers. I now have a spin-off show with writers. We've had Patrick Klinger, who was certainly one of the top sports people around. He has a spin-off show that came from his interviews here. Law enforcement and fire, you saw them earlier. We've had some of our business leaders and our restaurant leaders, our restaurant owners. armed forces, veterans, the National Guard. I've had 2 generals from the Minnesota National Guard, and a lot of sports figures, a lot of Minnesota Twins, some interviews, some debates, and to me, it's probably what's kept me going, and been certainly one of the highlights of my life.
Tell the people how many people. I know you've added up over the years, how many interviews you've conducted.
Well, not me alone, but the program, has had over 3,000 interviews. Over 3,000. And we've had a lot of specials. I mean, there was a special after Hurricane Katrina. Mm-hmm. A year later, Sharon and I went to New Orleans, and we did a special about the devastation in the Ninth Ward. Things like that. She handled the camera, and I did the interviews. We did the same thing when the Twins were in Fort Myers. Again, Sharon had never handled a camera before. Got a great special out of that. We did that on a couple of occasions. Twins Fest, a lot of the Twins players. All of these things, which are part of what makes this democracy work, what makes this nation great. And we were able to touch so many bases. You know, I say doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs. We actually have had doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs.
Yes,
so,
wonderful. Well, you are very familiar with the wrap-up sign, and I've got the wrapped-up sign. So all the rest of the questions that I have for you will have to wait 5 years for our next anniversary. I'll be back on the 30th to celebrate with you.
Don, thank you so much.
My pleasure, Alan. Thank you. And now, one of the very, very first guests that Access to Democracy ever had, former Governor Tim Pawlenty.
As I said 5 years ago, access to democracy is really important. And it's an honor and a privilege to be back to help celebrate this program's 25th anniversary. It's been an amazing 2.5 decades. Alan and his team have brought incredible guests, also me once in a while as a guest. But I appreciate the public service that this program has provided, giving access to candidates, to public officials, to public debate. We need more of that, not less of that, in our society today, which has its challenges. But we remain a great hope of the world as a democracy, and that starts with free speech, free exchange of ideas, free exchange of debate, and this program typifies those types of values and opportunities. So again, thank you and congratulations on 25 great years.
Bill Raker has been one of the great co-hosts on this program over the last 25 years. You've seen him recently. So let's listen to an interview with Bill Raker.
Bill Raker, one of the pleasures of working on Access to Democracy as a host is that I get to work with you as another host of this show. Over the years that you have been doing interviews on Access to Democracy, many of your interviews have focused particularly on issues affecting seniors in our community. Say a little bit about that, and what are some of the most memorable guests or interviews or topics that you have dealt with during your time as a host?
Well, Steve, thank you for the opportunity to reminisce a little bit about that as we participate in this 25th anniversary celebration. You know, our term, the name of our program, Access to Democracy, it's a big umbrella, and a lot of things can be gathered under that. Not just programs about politics or politicians or public servants or people who work in the capacity of government. We need to talk about the people that are governed, the organizations that make up the democracy. You know, to use a phrase that another famous person has used, it takes a village to have a democracy, right? And so my focus has been on people and organizations, mainly nonprofits and service organizations, whose mission it is to improve the quality of life for everybody, but specifically for seniors, for older people. You know, some of my guests have been from AARP, that organization where we've talked about the scams and the frauds that not just older people, but any age group could be subject to. I've had guests from the Social Security Administration, from IRS, who've talked about the kinds of scams that those federal agencies experience. I've had a guest from the Attorney General's office who talks about the Attorney General's office, his role in protecting seniors, protecting the citizens of the state of Minnesota. We've talked about caregivers. You know, caregiving is so important. And, you know, people, they've either been a caregiver or they will be a caregiver or they will have care given to them throughout the course of their lifetime. So caregiving is really important. And we've had people talk about the resources and the help that caregivers and their families can have access to. Very important conversations to be having on a program like Access to Democracy.
One of your interviews that I recall specifically was about the importance of seniors having medical directives. What happens to them if they can't make decisions about their health care, and how important that is to be prepared for that contingency.
Absolutely, Steve. I think I had that guest on the program 3 times because the message is really important, and it's a really long and somewhat complex message for people to understand that you need to make the decisions, the critical decisions, before you need to make the decisions. Mm-hmm. And that's what the process of planning for your future is when you don't have the capacity to plan for your future.
Right. So how do you see Access to Democracy after 25 years in terms of our relevance to what's happening in our community today?
Steve, we're just getting started. 25 years is just the beginning. The role that an organization or a program like Access to Democracy has in our democracy, in our country, is just going to increase. It's so important that the public has access to information that they can get on a program like this. You know, we're not scripted. We're really not funded by sponsors who are looking to get a message out there. What we're really trying to do is to give information and perspectives that helps people be anchored in democracy as opposed to being blown some which way with the wind.
And seems really important, especially now in our country and in the age of social media, where so many people get their information from sources that are not necessarily reliable or fact-checked, that we try to present factual information, fact-based information for people to make decisions or to form opinions about. That's really important, isn't it?
That's the objective of the program that Alan and Sharon started 25 years ago. And they stuck to that premise, stuck to that format, if we continue to stick to it, I'm sure we'll have another 25 years of serving the public with the kinds of guests and information that we bring to them.
Let us hope so. Thank you, Bill Raker.
Thank you, Steve.
My pleasure now to introduce one of my old friends, Patrick Klinger.
Hi, this is Patrick Klinger. I host Behind the Game, and I want to congratulate Alan Miller and Access to Democracy on 25 years. The show has been an absolute institution in the community. It's been a platform to provide so many different views and heard from so many different guests. Alan is a cherished treasure in Eagan and around the metro area, and I simply want to wish him the very best, and let's hope for another 25 years of Access to Democracy.
Part of the program, backstage and on camera, is Steve Francisco, because as a co-host and co-producer of this program, you've seen him often, but I wanted to bring him on to talk about the future of what is going to be Access to Democracy and its various variants that may come forward. But the first thing I wanted to ask you, Steve, is of all the interviews you've done, what was the most memorable of all those interviews?
Spring of 2022, I had an opportunity to go to Ukraine to help the refugees about a month after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And some friends of mine from Chicago who were with a nonprofit went to southern Poland to a little town called Przemysl. Took me 2 weeks to learn how to pronounce the name of the town. But I flew over there and worked at a refugee center, and we were bringing refugees, assisting refugees who were being resettled to countries all over Europe. When I came back home, I realized that there was a connection to Minnesota. By the way, I should say I meant 3 other volunteers who were from Minnesota, including a University of Minnesota medical student, 2 firefighters from Maple Grove who were also working at the Refugee Center. Alan Miller did an interview with me about this experience. It was really a profound experience.
Why am I not surprised that you met Minnesotans in turmoil?
You meet Minnesotans all over the world, and I
Yes.
travel a lot, and that's always been the case,
Yes.
but always doing good things. But anyway, what happened after that, I came across an organization called the Protez Foundation, and I had the privilege of interviewing on Access to Democracy Dr. Yakov Gradinar, who is a physician originally from Ukraine, and he was bringing wounded Ukrainian soldiers and civilians to Minnesota to be fitted for prosthetic devices. And as you know, Minnesota is famous for having companies like Autobach and others that have made prosthetics here. Our reputation as a medical center is known worldwide. And to have him on that show talking about the experience of treating these wounded civilians and veterans of the Russian invasion into Ukraine was really profound. So many of our shows deal with local topics of interest, and I think we do a reasonably good job, very good job at covering those types of issues. But sometimes our horizons expand to cover the world too, and that was one example. To me, it was a very memorable interview.
Yeah, I've noticed that the program has had more of an international feel, not just a local feel, which is important, very important, is the stable piece of this kind of access to democracy programming, but that you have expanded that. I wonder if that has to do with your experience as a congressional staffer, that you had to see the world not just as it occurs domestically where policy is concerned, but as we have heard in the latest conventions, that we are basically the center of the universe for the world, and what we do makes a difference, and what we know and how we think about problems abroad is something really part of citizenship.
That's an excellent point, because the world does look to America for leadership. And when our institutions of government, when free and fair elections are challenged, when the rule of law is under assault as it has been, it's important that people be able to get the truth and get messages about how valuable it is, how important it is to protect those institutions that are essential. You know, we can't have democracy without a free press. And as one example, so, you know, being citizen journalists in a way, we try to communicate with our neighbors and our networks all over Minnesota to bring those types of messages and this kind of programming. And it's remarkable that our show's been on as long as it has been.
You're experiencing the same thing I think I experienced throughout my journalism career. That there are pockets of people, I don't know what percentages, don't know if it's ever been done where they've actually done an assessment, but there are people who think internally, and then there are people who think externally, that, and it goes back as far as the United States wars are concerned, what happens over there is not our problem. Mm-hmm. And then there's a group of people saying, what happens over there is our problem.
Absolutely.
So how do you frame a conversation
Right.
and a piece of information that you wish to share with people that can provide the inspiration to think differently?
Right. We live in a very different world in the 21st century than any of our ancestors or predecessors did. Information travels at lightning speed, which means that misinformation travels at the speed
yes.
of light too. So I think it's our job as citizen journalists to try to put things in perspective and make people aware. When we did the show with Dr. Gradinar and the people from Protez Foundation, hopefully it told Minnesotans that we were playing a role in helping people who had been victimized by Russia's brutal assault into Ukraine. And so there are connections. We do live in a very interconnected world, and it's just the reality that we're in.
Mark Twain used to say that that a lie travels at lightning speed around the country while the truth is just getting its shoes on.
Right.
And before you go, I want to. What is the future? Because this is an expanding thing, access to democracy. Right. What are your future plans?
We are very fortunate, as Alan has mentioned in his segment with you, we have a wonderful staff. Alan and Sharon Miller have carried this show for so many years. They brought me into this show. They have brought other people. Bill Raker, who does many great interviews on our show, is now moving up to be a co-producer, joining Sharon and I as Alan steps back. There are great interviews in the future. We've just recently introduced 2 new segments on access to democracy. We'll be doing occasional segments on healthcare issues, which with an aging baby boom population, I'm part of that. We have Dr. Jeff Thompson, who is a retired physician from the Mayo Clinic, who will be doing episodes of our show occasionally, about 4 or 5 times a year, to talk about healthcare issues. He'll be coming on soon to do an episode about diabetes, and he brings physicians from the Mayo Clinic to talk to our viewers about those issues. So it's not just all politics all the time. We're spreading our wings, so to speak, in other areas. Another area that we're branching out into in the future, we've started a new segment, occasional segment, on international travel, which is a subject dear to my heart because, as everyone who knows me knows, I love traveling. I've been to 40 countries around the world. I grew up in an aviation family. My dad worked for Northwest Airlines, so from a very young age, travel was the thing. And I did a stint with Sun Country Airlines as a flight attendant and trainer. But Holly Jenkins is hosting occasional segments about international travel to give our viewers a flavor of destinations around the world that they may want to visit. Her first interview recently was with me about a trip my wife and I took to Southeast Asia earlier this year. We were in Singapore, Cambodia, and Vietnam for 3 weeks. And so I think these are things that engage viewers. I think they're interested, and even if they never get to some of these places, it maybe shows them something about another part of the world that they weren't aware of before.
Thank you very much, Steve, for being able to provide not only a worldview, but providing the basic information for sustainable democracy that you have been doing your whole life. And I just appreciate you being here.
Thank you,
and thank you for everything you've done for Alan and Sharon, this program, and for the community.
It's an honor for me. I feel very privileged to be able to do this and look forward to many years more doing our program.
I know the feeling. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now Senator Jim Carlson is up next.
Hello, my name is Jim Carlson. I'm the state senator for this district, which is now Senate District 52. I really feel a very close affinity with access to democracy. They have made sure that I've been able to appear on Access for so many times I don't remember, but my history goes before being elected or even running for the Senate. Way back in the early 2000s, I started watching this kind of strange show with this old guy that would do the interviews, and I said, gosh, I wonder, can I use him to get publicity for my friend, Justice Paul Anderson, who was running for re-election to the Minnesota Supreme Court. So I called up Alan Miller and I asked him, say, can I get Paul Anderson to come onto your show? And he said, sure. Nowadays, I just asked Steve Francisco, how many places do you have video showing up? And he said, we distribute it to 35 different communities. So it goes out electronically to these communities. A lot different than it was way back when they used to burn a DVD and hand it to us when we left the studio. So I have a huge affiliation and affinity for this show, and with Paul, with Sharon, with Steve, and all of the other hosts and temporary hosts that have been on this program. And I know that 25 years let's say in my calendar is quite young, but it also is quite significant in what it has donated or contributed to the the voter outreach to the voter information, the voter education here in Egan. And I don't want to say that it's not also been very important for Alan's favorite baseball team as well, because he's always had baseball people from the Twins on here. So this is really a community program that everybody owns, everybody takes part of, and I'm hoping that this 25 years is just the first 25 years.
Welcome back, everyone. Don Shelby once again. This is one of the heydays of my retirement, to be able to sit down with all of these people that Alan Miller has been able to befriend and made a part of the community, because without my next guest, Access to Democracy would be just a good thought, a good idea, one that had a life and then went somewhere else. But it lives today because of my next guest, Chairman of the Metropolitan Airports Commission. Almost every commission that any governor of the state of Minnesota has ever come up with on technology, his time at Thomson Reuters as a great executive there, actually gave a home to Access to Democracy. And it's amazing that that's 20 years ago that you opened up the facility and said, this is a home for this kind of information. Rick King, thank you very much for being here.
Great to be here with you, Don, and great to talk about Access to Democracy. Hard to believe, 25 years, it's amazing. And it's also hard to believe that that facility where we had the studio was 20 years ago.
Yes.
That's just amazing. And, you know, it was tremendous benefit, not only for ETV, not only for Access to Democracy, but to Thomson Reuters. For a company at the time, and I don't work there anymore, so I'm speaking on my own here, who cherishes information to have people make good decisions about their lives and the social and economic lives of the community they live in, as well as the political lives. Information is the fuel of that all. And Access to Democracy is one of those things sponsored by citizens and people like Alan Miller and others who have just jumped on there and have brought to people information that helps them understand their governments and be able to make the right calls.
Well, that's a great commercial. We'll just take that, box it up, and then put it on the air from now on, because you've hit the nail on the head. Of all of the great positions you've held in your life, and the vita is incredibly long, and I could spend an hour just talking about
Please don't. Please don't.
There's one that is not often said, but I think it's timely to mention. Back in your Vermont days, you were a coach, and that's how I've always seen you. Of course, you have all of this great power and influence, but you're a person, and I know people who've worked for you who say you operate like a coach, and it's timely because the current governor of our state, now the vice presidential nominee of the Democratic Party, is now being called coach, which resonates because everyone, the vast majority of people, have had that kind of mentor, that kind of trainer, that kind of confidant in their lives to give them direction. I think that's what you do when Access to Democracy, and what Alan has been doing all of these years, is sort of being a coach to tell people not how to do things, but to say, I'm there for you, and I'll notice where this is wrong and when we need to talk about this kind of subject. Do you ever think of yourself as coach?
Well, actually, I do. We'll start really at the beginning. One of the biggest challenges in my professional career was deciding to leave teaching and coaching, which my goal when I was a younger person was to be a school superintendent.
Yes.
So I was on the progress to do that. I had my certification and so forth. I ended up joining a company that sold educational hardware and software. So I ended up working with teachers to use technology to be more effective in what they did, to supplement what they did. And the selling point from my boss at the time was, Rick, if you want to impact people, you want to coach people, you want to impact students, we have millions of customers. You only have thousands. And it was a very compelling statement, and that got me started in the world of educational technology, then technology itself, and the rest is the career. But back to the coaching. What I realized probably about halfway through this time was that I was really doing the same thing that in the business world that I was doing in the teaching coaching world. You have a team, you have a goal, you have players that you put in the best positions, you're looking for the best athletes. They don't all have to have the same viewpoint and agreement, but they need to be positionally playing a really good job. You know what? When I realized it was the same, it was invigorating because it brought together my early career interests and what I was doing then currently. And ever since then, that's the way I've described it. I want to be a good coach for people. I want to bring out the best that people can be. I want to facilitate good things happening. And that's conversation that I actually have had with our governor, because while he taught geography, I taught math and computer science. We both coached football. I coached baseball, and I was a hockey referee. I think he coached basketball and track, I think, in his career. But what I have always said, and I said to him before all of this latest news came about, is that a good teacher can do anything. A good teacher can do anything, because the kind of talent that is required to be a good teacher is transferable to so many other things.
Can I tell you something? I don't make a life decision without calling my now 89-year-old high school basketball coach. I always call and say, here's my options. How do I play this?
Isn't that something? And, we all, I think teachers would all say this, you saw a whole lot of students rise up in support of our governor after his candidacy here, being named the vice presidential candidate. I get emails and LinkedIn connections from students that I had 30 years ago that are telling me about their children, what they're doing, and always reminiscing with something that happened in the classroom that meant something to them. And that's why you call your basketball coach, because they did something along the way that meant something to you.
Well, Mr. King, thank you very much for your leadership, for your ethics, for your good heart, for what you've meant to this community, what you've meant to Egan, for this program, because the idea of access to democracy is coaching, and you have been an excellent coach throughout your career. And thank you very much on behalf of Alan Miller, on behalf of the people who watch this television show and absorb the kind of information you have to share. Thank you for what you did. Thank you for Thomson Reuters. Thank you for your continued work in this community. And it's been a pleasure, and it's great to call you friend.
Well, thank you, Don. I appreciate that. It's so nice to be here in this third facility that I've done this show in. The first one made me aware of the show, and then the need to find another studio. And the fact that we at Thomson Reuters also do some shooting of video that we need to use with a global audience for our own employees. And the combination of thinking about that together, hey, we could use this ourselves, and they could use this, we could share. The idea of a private-public partnership, I don't think is terribly unique, but it takes some drive to get those kind of things done, because there's always people that always are wondering, well, isn't that going to do this? Isn't that going to do that? There's going to be people walking through the building unbadged and all those things, and go, time out. Let's rise up above that and think, isn't this good for both of us?
Yes.
Yes. Now let's go sweat the details, because we can make that work. And we did.
You've done that to it fairly well, and we're eternally grateful for your presence in the community. And now another segment for you on access to democracy, Representative Liz Ryer.
Hello, and congratulations to Access to Democracy on your 25th anniversary. I'm Liz Ryer, State Representative from House District 52A, and it's a pleasure to be a repeat guest on this very valuable and interesting program. I'm a regular watcher, and one of the things I love about the show is that the host always bring in people with a variety of perspectives. We get people from all parties. We get people from nonprofits, League of Women Voters, other groups. And to me, it really fulfills the mission of a program like this in public TV to help support our democracy. We bring information to people. We have to be able to depend on knowing the truth about what's happening around us, what's happening in our environment, and where our government and leaders are taking us. For me, it's always valuable too, because I know that this information will go out and people in my district, my constituents and others will be able to know more about where I stand. And the interviewers don't hold back. They ask the hard questions and the fun and easy questions. So it's always a wonderful exchange. It's always an adventure to be here. And again, congratulations on 25 wonderful years. Alan, Sharon, you've done incredible things, and I'm so glad that you've brought this to our community.
There are two people who are joining me right now who have been involved in the history of Eagan, the history of access to democracy, frequent guests on this program. And there is nobody more important, in my view, in the political makeup of any kind of community than law enforcement and the fire department. I always wanted to be a firefighter in my life, and I think in investigative reporting I kind of turned to a police officer somewhere along the line. So we have some great guests who you're familiar with, and I'd like to bring in Eagan Police Department Chief Roger New. We have a lot of things in common, Roger and I, in terms of the things that we like to do when we're not in uniform, so to speak. I'm wearing a uniform right now. And also, I'd like to talk with the Eagan Fire Chief, Hugo Searle. So it's an important point of this discussion, not only to talk about the things you want to talk about in terms of fire prevention, the things you want to talk about in terms of law enforcement, the changes we've seen, but I'd also like to focus, as you are thinking about your answers, on what's happened in 25 years. What has changed since Alan Miller first started this program and embraced this community and started having these long discussions, important long discussions that commercial television couldn't have. Not just sound bites, but full discussions.
Sure.
So, Chief, what do you think, first of all, the most important thing in the community that you see in your bailiwick and how it has changed?
You know, it's interesting, Don, and thanks for having Chief Searle and I here today. I will simply say that, you know, probably one of the biggest things that's changed for me in the past 25 years is my hair. It's gotten a little bit grayer, especially as I've held the rank of Chief of Police. But in all seriousness, you know, when I think about the community, I think, you know, one of the largest things that I've seen change from a public safety standpoint is technology. The evolution of technology and how we do our job today versus how we did it, you know, 25 years ago has changed drastically. And the neat part over, you know, that period of time is that Alan has given us an opportunity to talk about some of the trends and things that we've seen in policing. And during that time, he's, you know, spoken to Chief Gagan, Chief Thurkelson, Chief McDonald, and I talking about, you know, the different evolutions and things occurring in policing.
Were you also the beneficiaries of some of the military drawdown, not only in terms of equipment, materiel, but also in terms of that technology that was being used in wartime. And I don't mean lethal wartime, but in terms of communications. Do you find that even smaller communities had the benefit of the newer technologies that were developed, maybe for different situations?
I think, you know, the neat part about Egan is we've leveraged technology in all aspects of public safety. You know, we've incorporated computers in, you know, our police and fire vehicles. We've incorporated, you know, we have forensic investigators that are investigating crimes on the police side. I think Chief Searle will probably talk about some of the data analytics that they do in fire to, you know, for call tracking and whatnot. But we've seen that evolution occur over, you know, the past 25 years. You know, in terms of leveraging military technology and whatnot, I would say if there was one component that we've probably taken from the military that we've begun to use in public safety is drones. Drones are one of the, it's a pretty neat feature, and you know, be quite honest with you, some of the technology we use, I'm glad I have younger people working for me because they're way more well versed at things like drones and you know, social media than I.
Exactly. Yeah. Chief Searle, you when you talk about the fire prevention as one of the chief measures of any kind of enforcement division, not just putting out fires. That's the after action to me. That's that's the result of something that has gone wrong. What are you doing new, technologically speaking, that helps us prevent fires? Is it in inspections? Is it enforcement? Is it better technology in terms of household alarms? What do you see that has developed in the last 25 years that, I don't want to say makes your job easier, but makes your job more functional?
Yeah, thanks, Don. That's a great question, because being able to focus on fire prevention is something we don't always do. People want to talk about the exciting part of putting out fires, but the fire that never happens is the best fire.
Yes.
And that's fire prevention. And in the last 25 years, we've seen tremendous changes in the fire service. Not just here in Egan, but everywhere. But here in Egan specifically, this city has grown, the population has grown, the needs of the community have grown, and so the fire department has adjusted. And we changed our staffing model from one that was based on response only. Volunteers. 25 years ago, community members that lived in the community that when they were needed to respond would get paid to come in and respond. Now, with a bigger community that we have and the better resources that we're able to leverage, we have a full-time fire department, so we are on duty 24 hours a day, every day. And that gives us the opportunity to do a lot more other than just respond. So that's fire prevention. So the fire prevention efforts that we make now are much, much greater because of that model that we have. So it's not just the fact that we can be in more schools talking to children about fire prevention, but we can also do more inspections of our businesses and our industries that are here in town and making sure that they're safe and meeting fire code. We also can make sure that people have carbon monoxide detectors and smoke detectors, and use some of that modern technology that we have to warn people of their dangerous situations. And so all that is done through our Fire Prevention Bureau, which is staffed now every day.
I don't want to shoehorn in on this, but there is a relationship between public information, not only that which you promulgate from your departments, but inviting in journalism. And I'll give you an example. Whenever we would do a report of a fire, say 3 children died horribly in a fire, we would always end that the fire department found that all of the batteries in the smoke detectors had been taken out. And then we would do tracking and find out that the sale of batteries, of 7-volt batteries, went through the roof. Everybody ran out after they would hear that report. And that kind of foresight sometimes creates a safer environment for the community because they're spurred to action based on the horrible things that have happened to other people. And it's a kind of an interesting relationship that police and fire and journalism have in trying to explain to people the importance. Otherwise, you get taken for granted.
Right.
You're always there. The fire department is always there. The police department is always on patrol. But when the police are needed, when the fire department is needed, to tell those stories publicly, and the result is this incredible sense of gratitude that you guys are around.
Yeah, we appreciate the role that the media plays in leveraging those terrible stories for good things to help us prevent fires, prevent crime, make the community safer.
Chief, there has been in the past years, particularly since the death of George Floyd, a renewal, even though it's kind of an old concept, of community policing.
Sure.
Of reaching into the community and saying, we're a part of the community.
Sure.
And we want to not just enforce the law, but we want to make this a better place.
Yeah.
Tell me how that's changed.
You know, really, it hasn't changed in Eagan. I started here in 1994, and community policing has always been a mantra of our organization, where we've tried to help fix and identify and address problems in our community. And, you know, I can tell you as a department, we continue to seek out ways to do that. You know, it was interesting following George Floyd because they talked about pretextual traffic stops.
Yes.
And, you know, should we, you know, be stopping people for equipment violations or expired registrations? And many people don't know that at that time we were, you know, affiliated with this program called Lights On. And essentially, if we stopped someone that had an equipment violation, like a headlight or a tail light out, we would give them a coupon and they could go to a service station and get it fixed for free. Wow. So we didn't have repeat calls. That's ways to address those problems. They also had, you know, they at the time were doing micro grants trying to help people that were in need, whose vehicle broke down. They were provided funds to get their vehicles fixed so they could continue to work. Wow. Those are the mechanisms that build stronger communities because people could continue to work and they don't lead to, you know, they don't have to, you know, commit crimes to maintain their livelihood. So I think community policing has, again, always been a mantra here. And the neat part about access to democracy is Alan has always given us an opportunity to talk about some of those things over the past 25 years to highlight what we're doing in public safety, especially around community policing.
Well, we're celebrating these 25 years for a reason.
Yeah.
And the life Alan Miller has given to the communities with just this kind of long conversation. And I wish we had a lot more time to talk to you because yes. I could do this for hours and hours and hours.
Yes.
Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us. I'd like to introduce now a great friend of this program, frequent guest, Congresswoman Angie Craig.
Hey, it's Congresswoman Angie Craig here, and I just want to say happy anniversary to Access to Democracy. Alan Miller has been an absolute superstar in making sure that each one of you have access to public figures and the topics of the day over the years. And I just want to say a sincere thank you to Alan and Sharon and everyone who's ever been associated with Access to Democracy. It's such a fun place to come and communicate with voters.
I'm going to introduce you to a person who you really don't need to be introduced to if you are a person who has watched this program over the past 25 years, past 3 years. It doesn't matter because Justice Paul Anderson is not only a frequent guest on Access to Democracy with Alan Miller, but also one of the brightest lights in the history of this state in terms of his guidance, knowledge, and his ability to communicate to people the meaning of the law. And so it is my extreme pleasure, and I can say, now that I'm off the air, a man I regard as a friend and a man that I regard as a mentor. So, Justice, welcome to the program again.
I know. It's so much fun to appear with you. And, you know, my history with this program goes way back. And you give me too much of a good introduction, but you say that I'm bright. I'm going to give a little bit of advice to young people. I'm not the brightest person in the world. I'm smart, whatever. But you can teach and train yourself to be the smartest person in the room. Mm-hmm. You absorb other people, you use other people's thoughts. Yes. Woodrow Wilson said, I don't only use my brain, I use the brain of everybody else in the room. That's what the key is that can allow you to give me that type of introduction, even though, organically it may not be true.
Well, I think that you've made a very, very important point, because what you do when you can be the most intelligent person in a room, and you come off this way when you are on a program like this, you are able to provide information in a period of time that is simply not available to commercial television or even in a 40-column story, because it's going to be background and your knowledge shows up in pulled quotes that maybe would be 5 column inches of your intelligence. The rest is background.
But you've touched on something which is important, which is, what is the role of this show, Access for Democracy? It is a vehicle by which people can learn about democracy in our wonderful civil society. You've seen the change in the news media, the print, and whatever. This show connects people with their local community. I think you were interviewing the police chief, the fire chief, but also keeps them informed on state and national issues. Because Jefferson said, quote, he said, if you don't trust the people to make the decision, you don't take the vote away from them, you educate them. Mm. Now, there are people that want to take the vote away from the voters. No. What we need in this civil democracy is what Access Democracy has provided. It educates the citizens how to be a good citizen in a civil democracy.
You've hit upon one of my favorite subjects, that is the idea of citizenship. We have to be careful about the use of that word, because it excludes historically groups of people that I don't want to exclude, but the idea of citizen involvement. But I have a question for you. When you are making a point, do you ever feel like you have to cut through the noise that is surrounding other people's thinking, the party politics or association with a certain sort of thought, a commitment to a certain type, a conservative or liberal position, and they begin to think only that way and are closed off to actual factual matter? Is there something in you that says, I'm going to say something that they cannot unhear, that it will stick in their brain and they will have to consider this fact?
Bingo. And it's getting worse. With the alternative social media, people more and more are listening to those they want to hear, a message that they are comfortable with, and they don't want to hear the other side.
Yeah.
And so I try hard to explain. Now, one of my devices, I can be a little insidious
I
on
love devices.
is that I ask them questions. Sometimes I'll play, I'm just a country boy who grew up milking cows. Can you educate me on this? Why do you think this way?
Yes.
What is the basis of your thought? Do facts matter to you?
Yes.
So I try to challenge them and probe them, be a little bit of provocative. I can't lecture to people. They don't like being lectured to.
Yes.
But challenging them and coming up with different ideas has worked for me.
And I think it works for the community, because the community is better off when they have more factual information. I always use this, and this is right in your wheelhouse, that when a defendant comes to trial before a jury, the judge, after they hear both evidence for prosecution and defense, and they're instructed to go into the deliberation room, they don't say, please return with your opinion. Say, return with your verdict. That means to me that you return with your conclusion after you've weighed all the evidence fairly. But opinion has taken over the world, Justice. It has taken over the world. And so how do we get information through the hard shell of the already formed opinion?
Well, you've had a soft spot with me, because what juries do, they don't determine what the law is, but we ask juries to determine the facts. The judge can make a decision under the law if he gets the factual findings from the jury. And this is where we have to work with people, is that, no, opinion has no place in your role as a citizen who's voting or whatever. It does, but you've got to get the facts first. And so just like a jury, the citizens of our country should try to figure out what are the facts. It's getting harder and harder to do that. And trust me, there are people who, and I've seen it, want to spin the truth in a way that it is no longer the truth. And truth is hard to find. Carl Burns said, our goal is to try to find the nearest approximation to truth that we can. And you know that. Yeah. You've been in the journalistic world. But you really do search, and that's what's so important. And you've got to get people engaged in that search for the truth.
Here's what you've taught me, that the opinion doesn't matter, but the informed opinion matters most.
Absolutely.
Thank you for teaching me that.
And that's what this show is about. In the early days of this show, first of all, I got to say, I know how much your support for this program has meant to Alan Miller and whatever. He's told me that many times. And I'm not going to pander here, but you are indeed a journalist. But you are a civic-minded citizen who wants to move the ball forward with respect to our civil democracy. And Alan appreciated your role in helping get this show going. It wasn't easy to begin with. Alan would call me on a Thursday afternoon and said, Paul, somebody's canceled, can you come in? Well, Fridays were generally open, and somebody said, well, Paul, you're just filler on this show. But we always found interesting things to talk to. I'd ask Alan and said, what are you going to ask me? He said, I'm not going to tell you. And what it turned out, we would just sit down and have a conversation about important issues in a way that we sought to inform the people. That's what was fun about this show.
There was a guy named John Havlicek, played for the Celtics a long time ago. He was the sixth man, sat on the bench. And when you finally saw that maybe we were going to use Havlicek in this game, he was a substitute.
Yeah.
And changed the game.
Did he make it in the Hall of Fame?
Yes.
He did.
And he changed the game completely. So if you were one of those people who, I'm going to substitute for someone else, you shined above everyone that's ever been a guest. Oh. I can say that personally.
It's been fun.
It's been fun for us.
I'm writing a book about the 1990 election, but when I get done with that, I'm going to put a compilation together of my interviews on this show, because it really does reflect an evolution of Minnesota history for, well, now it's almost 22, 23 years.
Wow. Justice Paul Anderson, we could have this conversation for hours and hours and hours, and I am a better person for having met you, known you, and been tutored by you. So,
it goes both ways. The audience can probably pick up how much we like and respect each other. But I've seen you in action, sir. And I can't do it here, but if we were on a show, I would ask you to tell me the roots of the ethical and professional approach that you take. It's got to be buried in there. They got to be. I know Dave Moore was part of that.
Certainly.
But there are got to be other people who taught you to be who you are.
The short answer is my mother taught me to recognize the virtue in other people, which I did not have innately, and I'm just a bunch of Post-it notes. The same thing that Woodrow Wilson said, that you take from other people to make yourself a whole. And thank you for reminding me of that quote.
Yeah, good parents are a treasure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this interview. I've had fun.
It's my pleasure. It wouldn't be complete, a celebration of the 25th anniversary, without sterling journalist Dane Smith.
I want to wish a happy 25th anniversary to Access to Democracy. My name is Dane Smith. I'm a former journalist and think tank leader in Minnesota. And I've been on this show many times. I've also been a host, and I just am so pleased that this show sustains the idea of public affairs journalism in this state. It is really one of the best examples of what makes Minnesota great, and that is a civic health. And Access to Democracy really gets to issues in depth. We are facing a bit of a crisis in this country with misinformation, disinformation, and simply not enough information. And Access to Democracy is an antidote to that. So I hope that Access to Democracy continues at least another 25 years. It is such a great Minnesota asset, and keep watching. Thanks.
Our next guest on Access to Democracy is someone I have waited a long time to talk to, because I think we have some things to talk about, because he is a journalist, pure and simple, and I spent a little bit of time in that field myself. So it has a lot to do with democracy, journalism, maybe a different way than it did once upon a time, and that's part of the conversation, because we are talking about 25 years. So Mike Burbach is the vice president and the editor-in-chief of the St. Paul Pioneer Press. And I wanted to welcome you to the program. Welcome you back, I might say, after 6 appearances here.
Thank you very much.
How has journalism changed in the past 25 years?
Well, parts of it have not changed. The business part of it has certainly changed. Most of us are smaller, have fewer resources at our disposal after a lot of the advertising money went to the big tech giants. But the core of it, the core endeavor has not changed. We want to try to figure things out. We want to try to tell it to the best of our ability. We hope to be both a watchdog and a source of encouragement for our communities. Those things haven't changed. It's just a little more difficult from a resource perspective. And the other thing that has changed, which is both for good and for ill, is that everybody's now a publisher. The barrier to entry used to be gigantic. You needed $100 million for a transmitter and all the works, or $100 million for a press and all the works. Now all you need is a little bitty phone and you're a publisher.
Yeah.
That has been, the way I like to think about this, is an explosion of freedom. Freedom is great. Explosions blow things up. They blew up our business model. And the other thing the other for good and for ill part of that is everybody now has a voice. And this is on the whole a really good thing. But not everybody uses their voice for constructive purposes. And that makes our business challenging. But it also helps inform us. So I aim to look at it, and I do, from that angle of view. More voices. The Republic depends on a cacophony. It depends on competition. It depends on checks and balances. but we have to make sense of it. And we're in a challenging period.
And there's no way, at least no way that I know of being able to factor in the numbers that you need to factor in on what's being said represents how many people, what we used to call the per inquiry. And because there is no necessary training involved in the person in the basement typing an opinion, I worry from time to time that people's opinions pass as fact. I don't know when it happened exactly, that here is fact to me, and opinion was down here. But now everybody's opinion matters.
Yes.
Well, I want to be one of the first to say, and maybe you can't say it because you're still in the career, but I can say not everybody's opinion really matters if it doesn't have any evidentiary base, if it's not factually based, if it's not based on research and inquiry, so that you're trying to arrive at an approximation to the truth. So what do we do with all of the noise that is out there that is wrong?
Yep, that is for sure a challenge. And I like to think that not everybody, I like to phrase it to say that not everybody's opinion is related to facts. But there may be an element of nutrition in almost everybody's opinion. And if we required people to know exactly what they're talking about before they expressed an opinion, we'd all be in some trouble, I think. But I think what it does is put the onus on us journalists who believe in our standards and believe in our ideals. It puts the onus on us to be better at it, to establish, to stand on ground that we can defend with facts, with fairness, with the traditional ideals of the craft. And we know more quickly, and we know maybe more intensely when we don't get it right, or when we're missing voices, because we hear them just like that.
Okay, but you've said something interesting about the missing voices, and I think those are important. But at the same time, the three-legged stool that we all operate on as journalists, of the accuracy, fairness, and balance, that I think journalism got into some trouble on what I would call false balance, a lazy kind of journalism where I'm set out to cover a story. All I have to do is get one side, and then I'll just go get the other side, and I've done my job. Garbage. You have not done your job, because your job is to isolate which of those statements have some factual basis in them. And so let's use climate change as an example. We labored for 20 years under the idea that it was a debate between equal sides, and now we know it's not a debate. But we participated in this false balance exercise. How did we discover our way out of that?
Well, I think it's a process. You know, I meet with every intern we ever have individually to get acquainted with them and to assert some things that I think matter. And I tell them, you have to go into this job with confidence and humility. Confidence that telling parts of the story matters. We got to do that. And humility in knowing that you never have the whole story. You need both. You need both, and we have to tell. And sometimes what I think we get into trouble when we mistake, a question in a way. They're not always put in the form of a question, a question about something for balance. So a long time ago, 15, 20 years ago, some time ago, I had an op-ed on my desk from the Union of Concerned Scientists, who I respect, I like. They're the Union of Concerned Scientists.
Of course.
And it was about climate change, and I said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go back in this and acknowledge the strongest point of the other side or the strongest question of the other side. And the response I got back from that person at that time was, no, we don't have time for that. And my answer is, I don't have time for this op-ed. You know, what you want from the journalism or the opinion journalism is people to feel smarter after having read it. And to do that, to make a good argument, you've got to know the strongest case from the other side. And it's not, you know, on one hand, on the other hand. If somebody says, well, you know, the headline says it's the warmest year ever. It is a 100% legitimate question to say, what's ever? You know, is it 4 billion years or is it 125?
Yes.
It's a 100% legitimate question to say, how do we know this? And sometimes in the froth of the public discussion, we mistake the froth for substance.
Yes.
And we don't tell the difference between substance here and froth here. And so my shorter answer to your question is, we have to concentrate on substance. You know, just getting a loudmouth quote from that side and a loudmouth quote from that side, that's not doing the trick. That's just loudmouthery, you know? It doesn't get us anywhere. Substance, always go back to substance. Know that you can add to it tomorrow. You got to ask another question. You got to ask another question. But it's, you know, what you're saying is true. It is easy to lose our way in the blabber.
Yeah. Can I tell you a story? I know we might run over here, but I just really quickly want to tell you a story about the importance of what you do. And I accept myself in this, the importance of what you do, because this memory is so clear to me. My mother said, don't talk to Dad for the first hour in the morning, and do not talk to Dad for the first hour when he gets home from work. Why? Because that's when he reads the newspaper, because we, in our even small community, had a morning newspaper and an evening. Now, he read, I can see him reading every story in the newspaper. It took him an hour to read every story. And I finally said, Dad, why are you reading? You're not a reporter, you're not a journalist, you're not teaching current events. Why are you reading so much? And he said, son, it's my job. And I went, what do you mean it's your job? You teach archaeology, you work at a galvanizing factory. What do you mean that's your job? That's my job as a citizen, he said. I want to take that ethos and let everyone, regardless of your political leanings, to absorb the notion that part of citizenship, the protected part of the First Amendment of the Constitution, is that this is not just a right, this is an obligation on your part to know the world. And these journalists in the trenches are trying to get information for you to know it better. So many people neglect it and rather choose the popular opinion or something they've heard from someone else. I'm sorry to take so much time, but I want to say thank you to you, Mark, because it's your work is so important to us. If only people realize how important to them this work is.
Well, thank you for carrying that torch and for banging that drum and for encouraging us to be worthy of it. I really appreciate that, Don. Thank you.
And we could not have something like Access to Democracy without the discussion of journalism, because anyone who knows the history of the constitutional process and how they figured out how we get a Bill of Rights together and why the First Amendment is the First Amendment is because the question was, if we're going to have votes, how will people even know?
How will they know, right?
How will you know without, so the importance of this work to the idea of America, to the idea of this ascendant constitutionality is sitting right here with us today on Access to Democracy.
Thank you for letting me sit with you. You've carried that idea and that work for many years, and it is important, and we have to do it well. We have to deserve the mantle. We have to deserve the work.
Keep it up.
Thanks, Don.
Never stop. Thank you very much for being with us. Well, this wraps it up. The 25th anniversary celebration of Access to Democracy. My thanks to Alan, to Sharon, to all of the staff, every one of our guests. It's important that we talk about democracy. Democracy is not just a word. It's how we live our lives. It's how we stand in the world. It's how we go about our business every day. Inclusion, thoughtfulness, care for one another, and the importance, the freedom to vote. You are very, very lucky, I can say from my position, you in the audience, to have had for 25 years access to democracy through this medium, and to have the important people you have been able to listen to and learn from. And it's been my pleasure to be part of this celebration. I'm Don Shelby. Thank you.